So, what if everything you've ever been taught to value about how we govern ourselves is just completely wrong?
Oh, that's a heavy question to start with.
I know, right? But think about the words we usually associate with a healthy, functioning society, like consensus, shared power, collective decision making.
Right, the stuff we learn in civics class.
Exactly. We're practically conditioned from kindergarten to believe that bringing everyone to the table is, the ultimate moral good. But what if bringing everyone to the table is actually a guaranteed, mathematically certain recipe for absolute mediocrity?
Yeah, it is a genuinely jarring question to confront because we tend to hold democracy up as this unquestionable ideal, right?
Right.
We operate under the assumption that pulling together the collective wisdom of the crowd will naturally smooth out the rough edges of, like, individual error.
The law of averages.
Precisely. We trust the law of averages. But the argument we are exploring today flips that entire assumption completely upside down. It claims that a crowd does not generate wisdom at all. A crowd just generates noise.
And that is why we are looking at such a provocative source today. We are diving into a manifesto written in 2011 by a writer named Su Feng. And the title, it really does not pull any punches.
Not at all.
It is simply called Democracy is the Pursuit of Mediocrity.
The author's core thesis is relentless.
Yeah.
He argues that true, meaningful progress in any endeavor, whether it's running a nation, fighting a war, or even just managing a business, requires a singular autocratic vision.
One person in charge.
Just one.
Uh-huh.
The moment you introduce democratic compromise into the mix, you introduce this fatal flaw that will inevitably lead your organization into a dead end.
Now, before we really get into the weeds of this, I want to give a crucial disclaimer to you listening right now. This text contains some highly polarized political viewpoints, and it challenges some very, very deeply held societal norms.
Oh, absolutely. It's intense.
Yeah, so we aren't taking sides or endorsing the author's views today. Our mission is purely to impartially explore the fascinating ideas and claims contained within this original source document. We just want to understand the architecture of this argument, regardless of how controversial it might be.
Right, we're just mapping out the logic.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the foundational philosophical argument the author makes. And it all comes down to the striking contrast between the wisdom of the solitary genius versus the wisdom of the crowd.
So Zifeng begins by entirely dismantling this famous Chinese proverb. He invokes Zhuge who is basically the ultimate historical symbol of singular strategic genius, to attack the whole idea of collective intelligence.
How does the proverb go again?
The traditional saying argues that three ordinary cobblers can pool their minds to match the wisdom of the great Zhuge, like three average guys equal one genius.
Right. Teamwork.
Exactly. But Suifeng completely rejects that premise.
He argues that the math of collective intelligence is just fundamentally broken.
Yeah, he asserts that neither 3,000 nor even 30,000 cobblers could ever outwit Zhu Liang.
Wow, 30,000.
To him, the numbers are entirely irrelevant. The author claims that when critical decisions need to be made, an individual with a lofty vision and grand strategies will always outperform the collective decisions of tens of thousands of mediocre people.
It's like comparing entirely different species.
Right. The brilliance of a strategist operates on a plane that a committee simply cannot perceive.
It makes me think of a highly relatable everyday scenario. Think about the classic corporate group project.
Oh, no.
Right, you get 10 people in a room to design a new presentation. One person has a genuinely brilliant cutting-edge idea, but then the mechanism of the committee kicks in.
And you have to compromise.
Exactly. To make everyone feel included, you have to incorporate Janet's confusing slide deck and Bob's outdated graphics. By the end of it, trying to please everyone results in this completely watered-down, ineffective presentation that accomplishes nothing. It is compromise at the expense of excellence.
That is a painfully accurate analogy.
But it's easy to say a single cobbler is better in theory. When you look at actual statecraft, autocrats usually make terrible blind spot errors. But how does the author actually prove that democracy leads to dead ends in the real world?
What's fascinating here is how the author uses a very specific high-stakes period of early 20th century Chinese history to build his case study against collective decision-making.
Okay.
He points directly to the career of Mao Zedong, detailing a very granular timeline to show exactly how committee rule nearly destroyed a revolutionary movement. He doesn't just list events, he analyzes the causality of how democratic bodies systematically blind themselves to visionary strategy.
He kind of builds this step-by-step prosecution of committee-based decisions, essentially showing how the group consistently votes for failure.
Let's walk through the timelines Xu Feng provides, because the mechanics of the failure are crucial to his argument. He starts in June of 1929 at the 7th CPC National Congress in western Fujian. Here, Mao Zedong was forced out of his position as the frontline committee secretary of the Fourth Red Army.
And he was voted out.
Yes. The text emphasizes that this wasn't a dictator usurping him. It was a collective decision by a voting Congress.
The committee steps in, believing they know better than the frontline commander.
Exactly. From there, the text moves to November 1931 at the Southern Jiangxi meeting in Yeping. According to Xu Feng, Chairman Mao was mistakenly criticized by the party apparatus and elbowed out of the Central Committee.
So that's twice.
Then, a year later, in October 1932 at the Ningdu meeting, he is excluded once again, losing his post as political commissar of the First Red Army.
Jeez.
And finally, in January 1934, during the Second Congress of the Soviet area, Mao is reduced to a mere figurehead, removed entirely as chairman of the Central People's Committee.
So over a span of basically 5 years, we see 4 distinct instances where the democratic mechanism of the party strips power away from their visionary leader.
Right.
But the author doesn't just treat this as, like, political trivia. He connects these committee votes directly to the physical destruction of the movement. He explains why the committee made the wrong calls.
The underlying mechanism, according to the text, is that a committee prioritizes safety, consensus, and ideological dogma, whereas a visionary takes necessary tactical risks based on the reality on the ground.
Because they can see the whole board.
Exactly. Because the democratic body in these instances favored conventional, consensus-driven warfare over Mao's unconventional strategies, the author notes that these collective decisions led to the gradual shrinking of the red bases.
It just got smaller and smaller.
Yeah, it ushered in a disastrous low tide for the revolution, ultimately resulting in the complete failure of the fifth counter-campaign against encirclement and suppression.
Which meant the central base that Mao Zedong had personally created was destroyed overnight. Like the committee's desire for shared decision-making literally invited annihilation.
The ultimate consequence of this committee-led catastrophe was that the Red Army was forced to abandon their position entirely and embark on the devastating 25,000-li Long March.
Wow.
The text frames the Long March not as a triumph, but as a desperate, forced retreat caused entirely by the incompetence of democratic compromise. Xu Feng uses this historical sequence as his ultimate proof of concept. Substituting a singular visionary for a voting committee doesn't just create inefficiency, it guarantees ruin.
It is such a stark warning for the listener. The author is basically telling us to look at the historical record to see that when the crowd takes the wheel from the genius, the car goes right off the cliff.
That's his exact argument, yeah.
But then the text shifts gears in a wild way. Like, it scales up from human history to the literal architecture of the cosmos.
Yeah, the scope of the manifesto expands dramatically here. Xu Feng argues that singular rule isn't just a practical political strategy, it is a cosmic blueprint.
A blueprint for the universe.
Right. He writes that the whole universe is run in a unilateral manner by one unique greatest creator. The author claims that the universe functions smoothly precisely because it is an absolute autocracy.
The argument is that if the universe itself operated as a democracy, the laws of physics would just unravel.
The text states that it is only when all life in the universe strictly follows the unilateral will of this greatest creator that order is maintained. If life were to deviate from this will and demand a say in how reality is governed, the universe would collapse.
I love the analogy he uses to illustrate this because it really highlights his view of how ridiculous human demands for shared power actually are.
Oh, the animal one.
Yeah. He asks us to imagine if a cat or a dog suddenly got upset with the natural order and started protesting. Suppose they cried out, "Oh, greatest creator, you have been too autocratic and domineering. The throne of the greatest creator should be shared in turns, and we need to hold democratic elections across the universe to choose the next creator."
It's a funny image, but in Xu Feng's view, if that cat or dog actually got their way and the mechanics of the universe were subjected to a popular vote, all of existence would simply disappear into chaos.
Just poof, gone.
Yeah, nature does not govern by committee. The text brings in a quote to solidify this metaphysical stance. The sage embraces the one and becomes the model of the world.
And he applies this embracing the one principle to every conceivable level of human organization. Like he argues that this pattern must scale all the way down from the cosmos to your daily life.
Totally.
The greatest creator is the one in the universe. The state leader is the one in the government. The boss is the one in a company. The conductor is the one in an orchestra.
He is unyielding on this point. Whoever creates a business should be the sole boss. They should make every single big and small decision, or at least directly delegate it themselves.
No board of directors voting on things.
Nope. So Feng reinforces this by quoting Napoleon. Nothing is more difficult and therefore more precious than to be able to decide. The core argument is that an organization can only be effective and orderly when a chief commander alone shoulders the burden of decision.
Wait, but what if the one is wrong? This is the massive glaring issue I keep bumping up against in the text.
Yeah, the elephant in the room.
The author is placing an immense amount of faith in the idea that the conductor or the boss actually knows best. What if the visionary is just incredibly flawed or misguided?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of why Shufeng is writing this, it becomes deeply personal. And he actually addresses this vulnerability directly. He brings up his own organization, a community called Lifechanyuan.
He claims that within Lifechanyuan, if the guide, meaning himself, were to be decided through a democratic election, and if he wasn't chosen, the entire organization would inevitably dissolve.
So he genuinely believes his specific, singular vision is the only load-bearing pillar of that community.
Yeah.
If you put his leadership to a vote and he loses, everything they've built is destroyed.
Yeah. He states that without his unchecked guidance, the hopes and dreams of all of the Chanyuan Celestials, the members of his community, would become completely impossible to achieve.
Wow.
He is totally convinced that subjecting his community to the whims of a majority would guarantee its collapse, regardless of how the members feel about it.
That level of certainty is staggering, which brings us to the natural follow-up question.
Right.
If singular rule is the natural law of the universe, and if democratic compromise is a guaranteed failure, then why do so many people constantly demand democracy? Why is the desire for shared power so ubiquitous?
The author provides a diagnosis for this, and it is a blistering psychological critique.
Yeah, it's pretty harsh. Very. Shuifeng outlines 8 specific types of people who actively seek out democracy. He frames the desire for a vote not as a noble pursuit of equality or human rights, but as a symptom of deep personal failing. Let's look at the psychology behind his list.
Okay, so he categorizes the types of people who want democracy as, number 1, irresponsible people. Number 2, people with mediocre minds. Number 3, people who scramble for power. Number 4, people who do things stealthily.
And he continues with, number 5, people who are selfish. Number 6, people who shift responsibilities. Number 7, people without definite views of their own. And finally, number 8, profiteers from others' labor who don't sacrifice.
Let's actually look at the psychology here, because half of these categories are describing the exact same phenomenon, the diffusion of accountability.
Yes, exactly.
He is arguing that people who lack definite views or want to shift responsibilities love democracy because a committee gives them a place to hide. If 10 people make a bad choice, no single person gets fired.
The author believes that whenever 2 or more people jointly control anything, it devolves into a massive resource-consuming process. It creates low efficiency and a culture of mutual finger-pointing.
Everyone just blames the other guy.
Right. And the stealthy people he mentions are those who want to influence power, but refuse to leave their fingerprints on the decision. Democracy allows them to blend into the crowd.
It is the ultimate shield for the cowardly. And this leads to one of the most striking metaphors in the entire manifesto. The author writes, "No matter how democratic a flock of sheep is, it can never resist a wolf. No matter how democratic a group of people with mediocre wisdom is, it can never match the vision and insight of a saint."
A democratic flock of sheep against a wolf paints such a vivid picture of his worldview.
It really does.
You can have all the voting, parliamentary procedure, and equal representation you want in the pasture, but when a predator arrives, debate doesn't save you.
Because a committee of sheep cannot vote away a wolf, the mechanics of survival require something stronger than consensus.
Only a strong, singular leader, the shepherd or the saint with vision in this analogy, can actually perceive the threat and take the necessary unilateral action to provide protection.
So what does this all mean? If democracy is fundamentally flawed and shared power is just an excuse for lazy or stealthy people to hide from responsibility, what is the working model for the future? How does the author expect a functional society to actually operate?
The author offers a highly structured alternative, which he calls the Lifechanyuan era.
Okay.
In this proposed system, society completely abandons the practice of democracy in favor of a framework entirely based on strict duty and absolute accountability.
It replaces the right to vote with the obligation to execute.
He uses the image of the 8 immortals crossing the sea, each bringing their own distinct, uncompromised power to a task to describe this dynamic.
That's a great visual.
In his proposed operational structure, every single undertaking, whether it's managing a massive state project or a small business initiative, is placed in the hands of exactly one responsible person. There are no co-managers, there are no steering committees or boards of directors, there is just the one.
And what happens to everyone else? Like, if there is zero debate, what is the role of the collective?
Total, meticulous obedience.
Just do what you're told.
Yes. The text outlines that everyone else involved must fully cooperate and strictly follow the exact requirements of the person in charge. There should be no arguments, no internal debates, and absolutely no searching for consensus. The author views any leader who relies on compromise as fundamentally incapable.
If a leader asks the group what they think, Shuefeng views that as a confession of incompetence.
If a leader cannot control their domain and instead decides affairs through consolidations and watering things down to appease differing opinions, Shuefeng argues they are squandering everyone's time, energy, and resources.
Wow.
To him, a true leader commands. They do not pull the room.
It is such a tightly sealed, uncompromising worldview. You have the cosmos ruled by one creator, organizations ruled by one boss, the psychological rejection of the mediocre masses, and a future built entirely on strict obedience to a singular visionary.
It's a closed loop.
The entire manifesto is constructed like a fortress. But then we reach the final lines of the essay, and we get this incredible plot twist.
Oh man, it is truly one of the most surprising conclusions to a political text I have ever encountered.
I couldn't believe it when I read it.
After spending the entire essay aggressively dismantling the concept of democracy and fiercely championing the absolute necessity of autocratic sages and unquestioned leaders, the author suddenly stops, pulls back, and asks a question that undermines his entire premise.
I am just going to read it exactly as it appears in the text. He writes, "Democracy always leads to mediocrity, and the wise should guard against that. But what should we do when a leader is self-willed, domineers their power, and exercises tyranny?" I do not know. What do you think?
This raises an important question, right, about the limits of theoretical governance. It is incredibly rare for a manifesto to end with a confession of its own fatal flaw.
Seriously.
He builds this massive, impenetrable argument for autocracy, proving the inefficiencies of shared power, and then right before he signs off, he essentially admits that a tyrannical autocrat is a disaster he has no solution for.
I do not know. What do you think? He just lobs the ultimate problem right back to the reader. The very people he just spent the entire essay dismissing as mediocre sheep hiding behind the safety of committee rule.
It is a stunning paradox. He successfully diagnoses the slow, grinding inefficiencies of democratic compromise, but crashes headfirst into the terrifying reality of unchecked autocratic power.
Right into a brick wall.
Yeah, he realizes the system he's proposing, total reliance on a solitary genius, has absolutely no safety net if that genius turns out to be a monster.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a really profound dilemma to consider as we wrap up this deep dive.
It really does.
The author builds a compelling, historically grounded case that democracy is messy, slow, and frequently waters down brilliance to accommodate the average. But consider this. If a flawless autocratic system requires a perfectly wise, benevolent visionary to run it without turning into a tyrant, maybe the true danger isn't the concept of singular leadership itself.
Right.
Maybe the real danger is the statistical impossibility of actually finding that perfect, infallible sage in a deeply flawed human population. Are we settling for the mediocrity of democracy simply because we know we cannot survive the gamble of a tyrant?
It is the ultimate trade-off of human civilization. We accept the frustrating noise of the crowd to prevent the devastating silence of the dictator.
Exactly. And maybe that mediocrity is just the price of our survival. So the next time you find yourself stuck in a frustrating, slow-moving committee meeting, just remember, you might be actively participating in the pursuit of mediocrity, but at least you aren't waiting for the wolf. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we will see you next time.